What that's done since probably the past 2 or 3 years is, hey, we rolled out too many SKUs and we weren't paying attention to that. We were just trying to roll as fast as we could because things were good and we weren't as in tune to the ROI as much as we need these 5 different colors, we need these 3 different links, and we gotta go.
Welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Toolbox Expert's Perspective. Joining us today, we have Jeff Cato, who's the VP of Marketing and E-commerce over at Jasco Products. So welcome to the show, Jeff.
I appreciate it, Kaylin. How are you, bud?
Good. No complaints. Life's good. Jeff, why don't you open up by telling us a bit about yourself, your career journey, how you ended up in your role?
Yeah, it's been a fun journey personally. I'm super happy with it. I started out not in the e-commerce world, just like anybody coming out of college. You sort of start one way and you sort of evolve over time. So I actually started out with Frito-Lay in a sales role, and it was a great experience and really learned a lot. But from there, I just really evolved and I went into the telecommunications industry for about 12 years and I did a lot of sales and marketing from that standpoint. And then from there, I sort of stayed in the, I'll say, telecom world, IT managed services, evolved with another company. And a lot of these have been more that mid-range size companies, small to mid-size, really where you do a lot of sales and marketing combined. And then I eventually evolved and got over to Jasco. It's my 4th company, so it's not like I've moved around a ton, but each of them were in a different seasonality. And so I've been with Jasco a little over 8 years, never been in the consumer electronics space, obviously understand the sales and marketing side of things, but when you get into the consumer electronics and sort of why I was brought in to head up the e-commerce and digital marketing, there were definitely some parts of it I had not had that experience with. But one of the, I would say, culture sides of Jasco is they're really about looking for the right people. It doesn't mean you always have to have the exact experience. And, there's different philosophies out there. And they had a philosophy is they knew me, they knew who I was, knew I was a good culture fit, and felt like I had enough of the other things that says, hey, these parts maybe where he doesn't have the most depth experience, he'll lead the team well and he'll figure it out for us. And so that's sort of how I've evolved into this, which has been a fun ride and a fun journey, and it's a great company.
That's awesome. So Jeff, in a category where products are often viewed as commodities, how are you making a case for building a brand where you have tons of competitors? And how are you getting that not only short-term sales velocity, but long-term brand?
Great question. So let me give you just a quick snippet of the categories we're in, because we are in a lot of commodities. Anything from lighting, both indoor and outdoor lighting, we do a ton of products there. You think about what we would call our power division, anything that delivers power to a device, whether it's extension cords, wall taps, cables, what have you. We are in what we call a C category, which are remotes, antennas, AV accessories, and then we do some smart lighting and then around the walls and switches. So very much, if you think about just some of those categories, very much commoditized. Now, keep in mind, we have about 10 brands. So actually, we are a licensee for GE Philips and Energizer. But all that means is we manufacture, we distribute, we sell, we pay them a royalty, essentially. And that's one of the challenges is it's a good thing and bad thing. So we have the national brands. That's why we love them and why we're a licensee. So that helps us from the credibility and some of the things that you just mentioned earlier. Some of those challenges is that's why we have those brands and we've been in partnership with them for a long time on certain product categories. And then we have some of our own private label brands. And then we also do private label for some of the large retailers. So we live in these different buckets. So I would tell you the GE Philips Energizer is a big deal in some of these brands and categories. And so we are able to really leverage that for the day in, day out consumer. Where it gets challenging though, in our particular market is you find a lot of the brick and mortars are going private label. That's just the reality. And so how do you differentiate yourself in that? And that becomes, I think, where those 3 national brands definitely have a play into it. And then where we don't have those brands and we go into other categories like lighting, we have our own private brand. And now the challenge is, okay, what are you doing to develop and build that brand? Because I think the business model has changed a lot in the past 2, maybe 3 years, where brands are building online first and then they're going into brick and mortar. Whereas you look at our company historically, and we've been around 50 years, we have typically gone brick and mortar, and then we build from there. So we're redefining ourselves. And now going back to your point is, how do you balance the short-term sales? Because you got to keep the machine rolling, but you got to build those brands sooner than later. And so it is this little bit of dichotomy, and you can only build a brand so quick, by the way. I mean, that still takes time. Even though you see some incredible brands, almost feels like overnight in a matter of 1 to 2 years that they pour in the right marketing dollars and do the right things. So I would say the national brands, that's given us a differentiation for the upper tier within the retail community and even online, at least in some of the categories we're at. But I think we've had to go down our own private label route in other areas where we want to maybe either do a more opening price point play, or we feel like we can bring some differentiation in the product itself.
That's great. And I wasn't aware of, obviously, you guys going down the private label route. So maybe talk to us a bit about how you guys are selling through virtually every major retailer, and you're also growing D2C. For maybe people in your shoes and other businesses, like, how are you avoiding channel conflict? How are you creating force multipliers across channels? Like, yeah, walk us through how you think about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, like, I'll give you an example. Like, we have our main lighting brand called Brighton. And so where if you're playing in, I'll call it the club path, let's say Costco and a Sam's. Obviously, they're very down and dirty on pricing, lower margins, not necessarily the path you want to go on D2C or even within some of the other major retailers. So it really gets to, you've got to differentiate that product enough to meet their price demands and margin demands. And then what we try to do then is add in some of the, I'll call it tech specs within that product that will deliver the premium. So I'll give you an example. We may do a particular lighting product that's a simple RF remote, and it's just pure white lighting, and it may work for a certain particular product itself. And then over here on our D2C, or maybe even Amazon or another large retailer, we may do RGBW. It may be app controlled. Lighting's going so smart these days. And so I think what that allows us to do is a separate UPC or separate SKU, a little bit more lessened on the specs. And then we'll come over here and really put a little bit more of the higher end stuff that people have said, you know what, I think I want color changing. I love the app. I'm willing to pay more for that. And then you don't get into some of the price matching that you can do online, because you know that if you shove the same SKU across all retailers, that's just going to create chaos and you're going to make everybody mad. So it really gets down to the product specs and then just figuring out where that pricing threshold is.
And it's interesting. The next place I wanted to take this conversation is very much related. I was reading a report this morning about overall website traffic versus own channels versus marketplaces and then native apps. And one of the really interesting insights is app traffic is growing double digits year over year. Website traffic is pretty flat, but the referral sources from AI engines is growing while other channels is decreasing. But before we go into AI, because every podcast needs to touch on that today, I'm curious to learn about Amazon as a marketplace. So we could talk about Amazon, but I'm more so interested in marketplaces as a whole. I mean, they're notorious for margin squeezes, copying SKUs. It's kind of like the dancing with the devil scenario. So maybe talk to us a bit about how you think about Amazon. And yeah, like, how do you decide what goes on your D2C platform versus Amazon? I think that's something that folks are really, really thinking about.
So for us, just to put it in context, we're a 1P provider, if that brings any kind of flavor to it. But we think of Amazon as part of our digital first strategy. So I think when we're bringing a product, we believe it enough to bring it to market, we're initially thinking we'll put it on Amazon and we'll put it on our site. And so that's a for sure thing for us. And so then when you look at that, I mean, Amazon is unique. It's trying to figure out where your product fits from a differentiation standpoint, because it gets so down and dirty on price. I don't think you always have to be at the low end. Personally, on Amazon, we've had certain products in certain categories that people are still willing to pay a premium if you can communicate that value effectively, which is a challenge. And we know that it's a pay-to-play model. So you've got to know that you've got to have a certain amount of investment dollars just to play in that space. And they are absolutely always squeezing for margins. I mean, if you're a 1P provider, you're always dealing with annual vendor negotiations. So that always comes into play. And then margins never good enough. Now you throw in another twist and you've got tariffs coming in. So we went through this in 2017 when we were, let's just say, practically 100% China. Well, that was a massive impact and a competitive, like we were at a competitive disadvantage depending on who your competitors were because you had a 25% tariff. And so now you roll that on everything and now it's a hot mess. Well, since 17, we've diversified and we're pretty much out of China. We're in other countries, but in the tariff game, these other countries still have tariffs. And this is where it gets interesting. So you look at the marketplace and say, okay, we're going to roll out in both places, our D2C and Amazon, and we're going to invest the dollars. Let's go. And we'll keep that pricing pretty darn similar. It's not like we differentiate the products, by the way. So from our standpoint, but now you throw in the tariffs, and this is where it gets interesting because it's a lot of a hot mess because of the things that you have to do, not just with Amazon, but the other major retailers to figure out what that percentage increase is going to be. And then how does that play across your other retailers? So that's right now, we're in the midst of it. And I would just tell you, it's being played out as we speak. And by the way, keep in mind, we had one round of tariffs in some of these countries. Everybody got the 10. In some of our countries, we've already gotten the second. So now we're going with the second price increase, trying to balance how much can you pass on or not pass on. And in our commodity markets, a little bit, $1 or $2 here and there, a lot of our products are $20 or less. Now, we've rolled out a lot more that's a lot higher average order value, but when you're in that 20, 25 or less, and that's a good portion of your market, $1 here or $1 there, and it can change the game overnight. So we're right in the middle of trying to figure that out where we can absorb some margin or we're just going to have to pass on some cost increases. But at the end of the day, Amazon's an important piece and you sort of got to watch your back door. I don't know how else to say it.
If you're listening to the e-commerce toolbox, you're entitled to a podcast exclusive website audit. Go to noibu.com/podcast-audit for a free scan that uncovers the hidden friction blocking your conversions and shows you where you're leaking revenue.
Not to make this slightly political at all, but like, is that changing how you guys are thinking about manufacturing? Like, is there a chance that that gets reshored, or does that not even make sense to go down the path of?
That's a fair question. I would say for us, so from 17 to now, we definitely changed countries, which has been helpful if you think about how it's at least playing out today. But for our products in the dollar price point, it doesn't make sense. We don't see a day in the very near future, at least in our market, for our price points and the products we have, which, by the way, consumer electronics isn't just a particular product you can just pick up and move somewhere tomorrow. It requires, I mean, it's taken us this long just to get out of China. Now, COVID interrupted that a little bit, but we would never see a day where we would come out of the US for sure. Not in our market, at least.
Hey, maybe when there's complete automation in fabrication, but maybe that's a time in the future, eh?
For sure.
Cool. Talk to us a bit about how you're looking at consumer insights across various platforms, whether it's reviews on Amazon or on your first party website. And yeah, how are you thinking about folding back in consumer insights into what you guys are working on?
Yeah, definitely. I think the obvious is reviews. And now we do have a tool. We use a particular software for us, Commerce IQ we use, and that's been a great tool for us the past couple years. When you look at it, one, from a review standpoint, they got some great automated tools that delivers insights on our products and competitors and really trying to figure out what the consumer's saying. That our product team really leverages that tool as well as our e-com team. It impacts us from, hey, where do we need to change the product to where we need to change content because these people are getting frustrated because they're not finding answers to these problems. So we use that Commerce IQ tool a lot. And then on our own site, we have teams that really look at those particular reviews around certain categories and that are constantly coming through that and giving us feedback. And by the way, it's a great marketing tool to utilize in social. Let's say you're at conferences. Sometimes we'll utilize those reviews in some of our marketing on the particular panels and stuff. If we've got certain strategic categories and we really feel like, hey, our rating review is a lot better than our key competitors, then those become, I think, good leverage points through all the different marketing channels. So we love that approach from a marketing standpoint. And then from an insights, I would say from an Amazon standpoint, definitely Commerce IQ has been our best tool. from really looking at market share and competitors down to the SKU level. It's really helped us where we're launching into some new categories when we're looking at volumes and competitors, where they're at. What's it going to really take for us to compete and enter that market if we really want to get into it? It's helped us on buy plans a little bit, to be honest with you, when we look at, hey, here's where that competitor's at. We would love to be at 10% of that volume here in the first 12 months. So we can back into our buy order plans and we can look at some seasonalities way before we even get into the market. And so tools like that have been super important either before we even go into the market with certain products to is churning a ton of data and helps us bring a lot of answers to why. Why is this particular SKU down? Did we lose the buy box? Did we lose this? Did we lose that? Did the pricing go down? As you know, it can fluctuate every day, all day. It provides a lot of the whys when you're asking, hey, why are your sales down? So that's been huge for us from an Amazon standpoint. And I think on the retail side, we have some particular data teams within our retailers, since we have in-store items quite a bit that we can really dive into, that gets us into pretty specific around the forecasting and stuff, at least. But I do think that tools like Commerce IQ are getting more omni-channel. So they're getting more into the Walmarts and the Home Depots, to where companies like us that are really omni-channel driven, ultimately, I think where that market's going is where you have one tool that can look across all items, across all platforms, and then can give you the why and help you understand those analytics holistically versus slice by channel.
No, that's a really good way of looking at it. And aggregating data across different channels is obviously going to be challenging for you, especially offline. What about ROI per channel? Like, do you have like a target ROI if someone comes to you with a project, given that you're potentially a lower margin business? Like, how are you thinking about ROI? 5x, 2x, 10x? That's something I always like to try and understand.
Good question. I'll put it maybe in two buckets. One thing that we try to look at is SKU proliferation is a big deal. And we went through that with COVID when we doubled up buys to try to get ahead of things and stuff. And when the market was really good, like for us, COVID was really good, whereas others, it impacted the other way. But what that's done since probably the past 2 or 3 years is, hey, we rolled out too many SKUs and we weren't paying attention to that. We were just trying to roll as fast as we could because things were good and we weren't as in tune to the ROI as much as, hey, we need these 5 different colors, we need these 3 different links, and we got to go. Versus now, I think we're a lot more scientific when we come to market, where we'll have a certain volume per week that we are looking for. And then we have a certain, I would say, margin threshold that we look at in our what we call GPAs that we call internally. And so if we have a certain margin and we have a certain threshold that we can hit, and by the way, in each item you're thinking, okay, does that margin give you room for promotions or not? Or are you going to go everyday price point? To then, are we meeting the minimum quotas? Because we have certain strategic initiatives as a company. How many turns do we want in our DC? We have our distribution center locally and stuff. And so what that's really forced us to do is really look at, before we come to market, can we meet that minimum threshold? Do we have the margins for either everyday price point, or if you want to do promotions, then you better be able to come at a higher and still not fall below a certain threshold. So that's how we look at it per se. Now, you get into the advertising, you start rolling into that. We got different ROI metrics from that vantage point. But when you just look at a raw item coming to market, I would say those are two of the bigger data points we look at personally.
Makes sense. When it comes to direct advertising, ROAS, how do you think about that? Is it margin dependent?
Yeah, that does impact it. Where it's tough for us is we have low price points on a lot of our items. So when you get into that, it's hard to get a really good positive ROI because they each have a story. If you're everyday price point and you're throwing ads, you don't have a lot of margin to play with and you can be upside down quickly. But then again, are you trying to buy market share to get going? Or are you trying to sustain market share? Because we've had a lot of items out there. So trying to figure out that on-off strategy from that standpoint. Now, we've gotten into certain other categories like our smart lighting, much higher price points, better margins. Your ROASs are much better. You know, we'll probably be usually anywhere between a 5 and an 8 ROAS on that. So that kind of price point, that's great. I mean, we can live with that all day long. You get into these lower price points, a surge protector for $13.99. I mean, it's a challenge to get above a 3 or 4 ROAS. And so you're not making hardly any money once you do that. So I would tell you it is margin dependent on the items. And for us, the higher price point, obviously you get more margin. And that's where we're trying to evolve as a company versus historically we've had mainly $20 or less for a good portion of our items. So that's the evolution we're going as a company. And so you can just imagine where you're going to make your investments versus others.
Awesome. Jeff, this has been amazing. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Learned a lot about your type of business. And yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, you bet.
The e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.